Leon, did you start?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Almost forgot what I was talking about today. Namo Shakyam Muni Buddha. Good morning, everyone. Happy post-turkey apocalypse. Or turkey genocide, I guess. Okay. So, today's our last class of the semester. Before our little winter break, and we'll come back after the Lunar New Year. So probably March. Yes. I also want to quickly make a quick adjustment to an announcement. So next Sunday was supposed to be our Venerable Abbot's birthday celebration at our 12:30 English service. However, the nun wanted to do a dual service with the Vietnamese members, and so we're going to move the time from 12:30 to 9 a.m. instead. That way we can have a dual service and include the Vietnamese members as well. So we'll take some of the portions that we would typically do in our English service for the occasion and implement it in the morning service, and then the 12:30 service will still happen, but it won't be the full formal ceremony. It will just be a shortened version, minus the gifts and offerings, and we'll just do the group prayer that we usually do, and then the abbot will give a Dharma talk, and we'll do the chanting. So it'll be a shorter version. But the official ceremony has moved to 9 a.m. So I hope everyone will be able to make it. Because then we'll have lunch afterward. Lunch for the Vietnamese is like 10 a.m. But we'll have pho, so it'll be nice and warm for the cold morning. And of course, in our retreat, it's the following Saturday. So the 9th is going to be our meditation retreat. So if you have not yet registered freely, please do so. Okay, so today I'm just going to go quickly again, since the sound from our last class did not pick up on the interwebs last time. I'll do a quick summary again of the jhana factors. But today what I wanted to go over more specifically are the signs that typically emerge while we're trying to achieve the factors. It'll give you these signs or these subtle signs that kind of allow you to be aware kind of where you're at, right? Because a lot of times when people are meditating unofficially, or if they don't have like a teacher, right? If someone's just trying to learn to meditate on their own, it's very difficult to be able to, after a while, gauge where you're at in your meditation practice, right? You may have this kind of stump in the road where like, I don't know what I'm doing, or what I need to be doing, or et cetera, right? And so it's difficult for a self-practitioner to kind of figure out what to do, where they're at, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very helpful when you have us to help you. But in that same, on the same token, the factors, again, the jhana factors are the meditative states that we want to accomplish or achieve in order to achieve the state of mind called access concentration, right? Because there are essentially 3 levels of meditation that we would go through. There's the momentary concentration, access concentration, and absorption concentration. And the momentary concentration is kind of, again, just the normal short-term meditation that you do on your own. So if you're sitting for meditation for like 10, 15, 20 minutes, that's kind of momentary. You're not really there to develop, because you would really need at minimum 30 minutes, right? But like when we come to services or the one-on-one class and we're sitting for meditation only for about 10 minutes, we would count that as momentary concentration. Axis concentration is the preferred state of mind that we want to be in when we're truly trying to be in a meditative state. So true, real meditation is this axis concentration, right? And anything beyond that, when we get to the absorption concentration, the jhanas, these are higher levels of concentration, higher levels of consciousness that we kind of get to, which we will probably never, I will probably never publicly speak on. It's a big topic, but the axis concentration piece, at least, is very doable. And if you've been meditating for a while, and if your meditation's at least somewhat consistent, as it should be consistent, then you may have already achieved this axis concentration state without even knowing it, or achieved one or more of the 5 factors without even knowing it. So today we'll go over some of those signs, some of the kind of key ingredients that we want to look for to kind of give you that aha moment, I'm at this level or I'm at this state. And so the first 2 are kind of the applied and sustained concentration are kind of self-explanatory for the most part, right? So the applied concentration is when we're first sitting down for a meditation. So our main object of meditation, right, your object of meditation at this point is using the method. Your object of meditation is your breath. More specifically, we're using the anapana spot, which is the spot like right here, right below your nostrils on top of your top lip. This is the anapana spot. And so when we're practicing meditation and we're concentrating on the breath, you're only specifically concentrating on this anapana spot. You're concentrating on the sensations of the breath at that spot. And you do not stray away from it, right? And so sometimes when we're meditating, we have to adjust ourselves, we have to move, or, correct your posture. All this is fine as long as you're simultaneously keeping attention on your anapana spot, right? And you're using fractions of seconds to multitask, which is the only time you're allowed to multitask, is when you have to adjust yourself or fix your posture, right? But you always want to be focusing on this anapana spot. And you're focusing on the sensations of breath. You're not following the breath like you would typically in other methods of breath work or breath meditation. You're simply just observing the sensations of the breath at the spot. Right? We use the first 4 of the Anapanasati Sutra exercises. And there's 16 exercises in that practice of the Anapanasati. But the first 4 are essentially what we're using to achieve that. And the first 4 exercises are breathing in a long breath, I know I am breathing in a long breath. Breathing out a long breath, I know I am breathing out a long breath. Breathing in a short breath, I know I am breathing in a short breath. Breathing out a short breath, I know I am breathing out a short breath. Breathing in, I'm aware of my whole body. Breathing out, I'm aware of my whole body. Breathing in, I calm my whole body. And breathing out, I calm my whole body. And so, if you pay attention to the exercises, it's not telling us to follow where the breath goes, right? Because there are other breath exercises that I've given you over the years where you are physically following how the breath enters and exits the body, right? But for this specifically, we're not doing that. We're essentially just standing guard at the Anapana spot, watching what kind of breath is happening. So you're just making the mental notes that the breath is short, it's shallow, it's cold, air is warm, right? You're breathing heavy, breath is coarse or it's smooth, whatever it is. Any sensation that you feel the breath is having, that's what you're looking for, that's what you're doing. Eventually, though, and then one of the first signs of shifting from applied to sustained is maybe the sensation of the breath gets very shallow, right? The breath gets so subtle, it almost feels like you're not even breathing, right? You can't even feel the sensation of the breath, which is fine, it's perfectly fine, and it's kind of exactly what you want to achieve. right? But a lot of times, if you have or developing strong enough concentration as you're watching the breath and the sensations of the breath at that Apana spot, and your breath does become very shallow and very short and almost non-existent, sometimes when you first kind of shift to that realization, it may freak some people out. You're like, oh my goodness, I'm not breathing. And so they take this deep breath in, right, and this huge sigh. You're like, okay, no, I'm still alive, right? But you actually don't want to do that, because doing that can potentially break your concentration, right? It can reset the concentration. So avoid feeling like you need to take a deep breath in if you've recognized that your breath is very subtle or non-existent, right? There's no such thing of non-existent breathing. Otherwise, you're obviously dead, right? So the body knows what it's doing. You don't have to tell the body to breathe. The body knows what to do. And so the body is breathing very slowly and subtly. It knows what it's doing, right? It's the same kind of subtle breath that happens when you're sleeping, right? And so don't freak out. But if you get to the point where you notice the breath is very subtle and non-existent, where you want to jump for that deep sigh or breath in, just shift your attention to something else momentarily until you get out of that kind of freak out, and then you can go back to your breathing. But try to avoid to make that big breath in. It may take you a couple of tries to get used to that kind of sensation, that feeling. So if you find yourself sighing or taking that deep breath in the first couple times, don't worry about it. It's fine, right? This is a practice. You're practicing how to work with meditation. So subtle breathing is going to be your first sign of developing access concentration. And after the subtleness of the breath, right, once it gets very subtle, or it seems like you're stopped breathing, then something else happens. Something else is going to take its place. Because the breath is so subtle and so short and sweet, that a natural feeling of joy is going to arise, or piti, right? Or sometimes they would call it rapture, or like this feeling of kind of mental ecstasy. Joy here is a feeling of joy that has no cause, right? It is mind-induced, and then this joy is this pleasant feeling or pleasant sensation that's felt in the body. And so once the breath gets very subtle and shallow, then you may feel this pleasurable or this pleasant sensation or feeling somewhere in the body. And at least in my experience, it's always in the hands, right? Where your hands just feel very calm and almost like they're not even touching. Like you won't even be able to sense the contact of hand on hand, right? Or the hands in your lap or on your knees, whatever it may be, right? It doesn't have to be the hands. It could literally be anywhere else in the body. It can be in the heart area, it can be on the top of the head, on your crown, or anywhere else, right? But you're not looking for this pleasant sensation. You're just allowing it to develop. You're allowing it to naturally emerge. And so once your breath gets calm enough, and it feels really good, and your body feels really good, and your mind is settled and feels really good, then this pleasant feeling of joy, of piti, will arise automatically. And so once you are able to notice that pleasant sensation, now the pleasant sensation can still arise even if your breath hasn't technically stopped, right? You could still be very much concentrated with still being able to feel the sensations of the breath, right? That's not a rule that the breath has to be so shallow and so subtle for you to be fully concentrated. That's just one sign of many others, right? But that's typically the main one that happens. But at any time you feel any pleasurable sensation in the body, then that's still a good sign of joy emerging, or joy is happening, right? And so once you're able to recognize a pleasant sensation wherever it is in the body, and if you feel like your breath and your mind is concentrated enough, where distractions are very subtle, where distractions are very, they're short and they're wispy and they're kind of just in the background, they're not really taking over as a full-on distraction, right? And so if that's happening and you feel like you're concentrated enough, and then you feel this pleasant sensation happening, you can shift your attention from the breath to that pleasant sensation. And now the pleasant sensation becomes your object of meditation. And so I'm still going to use the hands as an example. So if you feel like that pleasant sensation is happening in the hands, and again, it may be anywhere in the body, it's going to have like this almost tingly sensation, right? Almost like when your feet first start falling asleep, right? You have that little tingling that happens with it. It's like that, but more subtle. But you'll feel that sensation somewhere. You can shift your attention from the breath to that sensation, pleasant sensation. And then just hold on to it. Just stick with that pleasantness. Don't worry about it being there, or don't worry about it going away. None of that is important. Just focus on the pleasantness of the sensation, of that feeling. And then it will naturally grow stronger. It will naturally grow. And as it grows, right, and it becomes larger, it may expand to other parts of the body, but it will expand enough and it will emerge and it will hit its peak. Once it hits its peak, what can sometimes happen is you become restless, right, which is also one of the hindrances, right? On the black here are the hindrances, and the factors are technically the antidotes to those hindrances. And so once joy peaks, it may cause restlessness, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially for those that are kind of still somewhat new to meditation. And I say somewhat new, meaning a year or less of meditation. You may want restlessness because it provides that kind of energy that keeps you awake in a way, right? But once it peaks, because as a factor, that peak of restlessness, unlike a hindrance, because the hindrance is going to be static, it's going to stay until you do something about it. Whereas as a factor, it's going to hit its peak and then it's going to drop. And when it drops, it turns into bliss or joy. Bliss, sukha. And bliss is now a mentally induced feeling of joy, a feeling of that pleasant sensation, right? Because as for piti, for joy, it's a physical sensation. It's a physical pleasure that you're feeling. Whereas joy is a mental one. So now you'll still feel some very subtle pleasantness in the body, but now it's going to be mostly in the mind. So now your body and mind are both content. They're both peaceful, right? And so at this point, another sign that may happen is a thing called nimitta. Nimitta it can be like these lights or shapes that kind of emerge in the mind, right? In your mind's view, you may see colors or shapes or kind of like this light, right? Basically, sometimes a laser show may happen, whatever, right? Which isn't, right? And some people kind of ask, some people will see this as a heightened sign, but it's really not that big of a deal. It's just a side effect of strong concentration, right? So if it happens, if you see these nimittas, these lights or these shapes or colors, again, you're not going to give it too much attention. You're just going to acknowledge that they're there, be mindful and aware that it's happening, because it'll go away, right? It's not going to stay there forever. It's going to go away. But being aware that they're there is still a pretty good sign to kind of indicate where you are. And then once you're there, and if you're able to continue developing your concentration, continue holding on to your object of meditation, now it shifts to the one-pointedness concentration, ikagata. This is where you're able to hold and maintain your object of meditation for the majority of your sit. Again, for me, or from me to you, a minimum sit should be 30 minutes at the minimum. And so if you're able to maintain a strong enough concentration on your object of meditation for at least 15 minutes of those 30 minutes, right, with little to no distraction, then we've entered one-pointedness. At this point, all those shapes and colors change into this diffused white light, right? Which, again, will start out slow, and as you start out small and slow, and as your concentration builds, it'll get bigger and bigger and larger until it covers your entire field of view in your mind. And then again, it'll disappear. Nothing is permanent in life or in meditation. But once we're at the one-pointedness, and you're able to maintain and hold that concentration, and not have any of the hindrances emerge, right? Then you can say you've entered access concentration. This is the state of mind where this is real Buddhist meditation. It's access concentration. And then from there, years later, if you want to develop and continue on, you enter the jhanas, and there's 8 jhana levels that I always say, never mind. But we enter jhana, which is just altered states of mind, altered states of consciousness. But those are not important or necessary to our practice because it's just a blissful state of meditation. There's no real... The only real benefit of jhana or entering jhana or practicing the jhanas is just an extreme development of concentration. Other than that, if we want to do contemplation or truly have realizations and aha moments and eventual enlightenment, it can't be with concentration meditation. It has to be with contemplation meditation, right? Vipassana. So all this is under the category of samatha meditation or concentration meditation, right? This is simply the roadmap, the blueprint to how to develop, maintain, and hold strong our concentration. But no realization happens here. There's no real aha moments. There's no attainments, right? The attainments and the realizations can only happen in vipassana and insight meditation or contemplation, because that's where all the aha moments come from. But this is needed in order to do this, because you can't contemplate on something if you're not able to concentrate long enough. Otherwise, you may be trying to contemplate and think of a teaching, for instance, right? But you're constantly distracted. You're constantly bombarded with distractions and thoughts arising, and you start to daydream or think about the past or think about the future. What's the point of contemplating? What realization is going to happen to you besides, I'm always distracted? That's the only realization you're going to have. So we can't have these aha moments. We can't attain anything if we're not concentrated enough. So we have to master, to a degree, how to concentrate in order to contemplate. There are also so anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing, or the breath, the meditation on the breath is the most common and most traditional form of meditation, right? But the Buddha also provides us 40-something other methods called kasinas, right? And these are meditation on like different objects and colors or visualizations, etc., etc. So you can use any other method to develop your concentration, but I use anapanasati because that's the most traditional and for the most part kind of the easiest to follow, right? Because not everyone has or not everyone can develop visualization for more than a few seconds, right? If you try to visualize something, it's only going to stick for a few seconds before you lose it. And it's one of the most difficult practices to develop, is to maintain a mental visualization. And then there are, of course, the other practices and whatnot, but Anapanasati is going to be the easiest because it's the breath. You have the breath with you wherever you go, no matter what you're doing, no matter who you are, you all breathe, right? And so it's the easiest one to use and to develop with. I think that's all the signs that I can think of. I don't know who I was talking to the other day, but I was meditating the other day to kind of remember what the signs are, because eventually you'll be able to skip a whole bunch, right? And not have to go through the step-by-step. And so since I usually skip, because I don't need some of the prerequisites of some of these, I'm like, I couldn't remember what signs happened, right, during the process. And so I was like, oh man, so now I have to start from the beginning. So now, and then I forced myself to go through the steps one at a time. I'm like, oh yeah, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. So there's always other more subtle signs, but for the most part, the slowness of the breath or the subtleness of the breath, the emergence of the nimitta, or the lights, or the shapes, and whatever, these are the two signs that are most likely going to happen to probably most people. And for sure, at least for sure, the subtleness of the breath, because that's just our body's natural reaction to a mindful mind. So that's always going to happen. The nimitta, the lights, may not always happen. And if it does happen, it's not going to be a linear shift from being weak to being so strong, where it's covering your entire mental view, right? Because sometimes, especially if you're going to shift your attention from the breath to the pleasant sensation, for instance, the pleasantness, it will grow, but again, it's not going to be linear. It's not going to happen once you see it, it's going to grow, right? Once you pay attention, you use that as your object of meditation. It may grow a little bit and stop and hang out, and then grow a little bit more, stop and kind of hang out. It may get smaller, stop and hang out, and then gets bigger and stops and hang out until, But at any time, if you do shift your attention from the breath to the pleasant sensation, again, you're only doing that if your concentration is strong enough, right? Because if you do shift to the pleasant sensation, and it does hang out for a while and grow, but then if it does stop and becomes static, or even disappears, right? Or if it's growing and shrinking too much, then that's a sign that your concentration is not strong enough, and you need to go back to the breath and continue on developing that concentration on the breath, right? And then once it's strong enough, then you can shift back to the pleasant sensation. But again, that's a sign. So if you do shift to the pleasant sensation, and it doesn't grow at all, right? You're maintaining that as your object of meditation. If it doesn't grow, or it does grow and stop and shrink and grow and shrink, or just goes away altogether, that's a sign of weak concentration. So just go back to the breath. You'll know it's strong enough once the pleasant sensation kind of becomes pretty overwhelming, and you're almost jittery to a point, right? And then once it kind of shifts from joy to bliss, right, from piti to sukha, it'll almost feel like a snap, right? There's not a subtle shift from one factor to the other. It's just you're in joy and you're automatically in in bliss. There's no kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Transition, right? There's not a real transition. It's just one thing happens and automatically something else happens. There's nothing in the middle, So it'll feel like a snap. If you feel that you're restless or you're you have too much energy, because that's pretty much what restlessness is too much energy, right? And so if you feel restlessness and then you snap into this joy, this blissful mind state, then you know you've transitioned over, or you've moved from one factor to the other. And then once you're in joy and you're able to maintain that, your object of meditation for, again, minimum of 15 minutes of your 30-minute session, then you can say that we've entered this one-pointedness. Once you've reached that, you're automatically in access concentration, right? Okay, I think that's all the science I can think of. I want us to always give ourselves enough time to actually sit for 30 minutes instead of over-talking and shortening our sit. Okay, questions, concerns, emotional outbursts. Yes, sir.
So, as you were talking about going through all the factors of development and concentration, I kept thinking about the mind. And we talked about how the mind, sometimes our adversary is the way we engage, but it's actually a tool. We use the mind in order to go. But as we get farther and farther along toward supreme concentration, is the mind still there? Or do we leave the mind behind as a tool and we go beyond our mind?
Not in these stages. You don't go beyond that in these stages. You do kind of escape the mind when you get into jhana.
That's what I mean. Do we get to a point where the mind is just
Yes.
there and set aside and needed?
Yes. Yes.
So in consciousness, what we're thinking or feeling, or we're not thinking or feeling, we're just being, that's happening without the mind.
Right. That happens because when you do eventually, if you do get to jhana, a lot of people mistake jhana for enlightenment because the mind is escaped. Right? The mind is no longer there because when you're in jhana, your senses essentially escape you. Right? You have no more the sensations of feeling. Like you don't even feel the pressure of sitting. You don't feel your hands. You don't feel your body. You don't hear distractions. You're undistractable, basically, right? As if you're dead inside, right? You don't feel or sense anything outside of yourself. So a lot of people mistake that for enlightenment when they enter jhana, right? Which is why it's a tricky method, because the mind is gone at that point. But before that, the mind's always there because you need the mind to know where you're at and to be able to concentrate and focus and escape the distractions. Pretty much. You need the mind to escape the mind, right? You need prison to escape prison. Otherwise, there's no escaping it because it's not there.
So jhanas, you could think of them as a state of non-development because we have that dual nature of this and that and here and there. That's subsiding.
Correct. Excellent question. Any other questions? My next book is going to be on the Jhana Factors, just FYI. I'm working on two. Many years ago, before I even became a monk, I published a book called The Buddha Journey. It was a book that had questions and answers, basically, right? It had over 100 questions. And I decided to rewrite it as a second edition from a monthly perspective, because I'm sure some of the answers that I've given at the time would be different now, being a monk, so that's going to happen. So that should be done and hopefully published by April. And then my jhana book will be complete probably mid to end of next year. Yes, sir.
Should you use concentration as a way to center yourself, calm yourself down, or
You want to do it in the moment. Because if you don't, then you're going to allow your feelings and emotions to take over, right? Because we are unfortunately habitual reactionary beings. And so if someone's yelling at us or arguing with us, our natural reaction is want to argue and yell back, right? But that, for the most part, doesn't do any good to anybody. Because at that point, you're saying and doing things without even thinking about it. And so, of course, we've all been in situations when we're yelling or doing things that we later regret, right? There would be no regret if you're mindful enough to watch what is happening in the mind before it's spoken, before it's done, right? And so if you're in a heated argument, or if you're in an argument or in any difficult situation, or uncomfortable or unmindful, whatever it is, you know what I mean, then it's important to watch what is happening in the mind. What are you thinking about? How are you reacting? So a lot of times when people are yelling at us or arguing with us, we're already thinking of a response. We're already thinking of a comeback. We're already thinking of what to retaliate with. This is unwholesome. This does no good for you, right? So instead of doing that, what we should be doing is just taking a few deep breaths and just listen. Listen to them. What are they saying, right? And observe how our mind is working, how our mind is thinking of it, how our mind is going against of this argument. Because if you're mindful enough, then you have the power to control what exits your mouth and what you do physically. You have control of not saying things that are potentially hurtful or unhelpful, right? You have the power to not hit back or throw things or whatever it may be. And so we really have to guard our mind, right? And that's how we become better people in general. That's how we are able to better be concentrated, how we're better to develop and better ourselves as people, is by watching our mind. Our mind is, unfortunately, right now, the master of us. We're not the master of our mind. Because if you were the master of our mind, you'd be able to control what you do, say, and think at will. Can we do that? We cannot do that. So we're not the master of our mind. So until then, what you need to do is guard the master. And you guard the master by being mindful in situations that are difficult. Difficult situations are the best exercises to develop ourselves. Because it gives us the the perfect opportunity to practice, right? Otherwise, we're just walking around, if we're just hanging out at home or work or whatever and doing our regular routine, we don't really have any stimulus to help us practice unless we practice, right? And so driving to work, to school, to temple, or to home, it's an excellent practice as well because there's stupid drivers out there, right? That cut us off or drive stupidly or too slow or too fast, right? These are also great opportunities to watch our mind, to be mindful of the situation. Someone cuts you off, a normal person would yell out, cuss them out, flip them off, maybe pull a gun out, who knows, right? Stupid stuff. But if you get upset about someone cutting you off and then you want to retaliate and go cut them off too, what happens? An accident may happen. You may hurt them. You may hurt yourself. You may kill yourself, kill others. Is that beneficial? Was that worth it, the 2 seconds that the person cut you off for? No. But if you're mindful, you're able to watch your mind and watch your reaction to being cut off and stop yourself from doing something stupid before it's done, unintentionally, then you can just say, well, it is what it is, and move on. Because you don't know what happens you don't know what's happening to that person. You don't know why they cut you off. There could be a valid reason that they cut you off. Someone in the car could be pregnant and giving birth and they need to rush to the hospital, right? Or maybe there's an emergency, someone's bleeding out. Maybe they're at gunpoint in the car or something. You don't know. But we feel so justified that how dare they cut me off? Who do they think they are? Don't they know who I am? So our mind, our ego gets in the way and allows the stupidity of our actions to emerge unmindfully. If we become mindful, then we can control those types of situations. and any other situation in life. Simply being mindful of our thoughts. Because everything starts at the thought level first, right? You don't, even though we sometimes say or do things without thinking, but truly there is still thinking. It just happens at fractions of seconds. It happens so quickly that we don't think we're thinking, but we actually are. But if we practice being mindful and being aware of how our mind works and how our mind goes through things, then we have the opportunity to guard it and watch it in those fractions of seconds that the thinking is actually happening. And then we have control of what we say and do. And that's essentially the goal of mindfulness practice, is to be mindful of our thoughts, speech, and actions.
Speaking about habitual reactions like habits, which are the antithesis of being mindful, right? Or if there's a habit going on in some action with really no conscious thought, it's just automatic.
We have habits according to our environment, right? That's how habits emerge, how habits are developed. It's according to our environment. And so learning to be mindful is basically learning to reprogram your mind from the habits that we grew up with. For instance, I'm sure you hate somebody, or you hate a certain group of people or type of people, right? Or you at least have some sort of bias or discrimination toward them. That only happens because you were taught that, or you believed that growing up. You're not born hating a certain group of people, right? If you put children together in all different shapes, sizes, and colors and ages, they're all going to love each other. They're all going to play with each other. They're not thinking about who's who or who's what. We only do that as we grow up. As people tell us, oh, this is a bad type of person to be with, and this is a bad group to be with, right? We develop all these phobias against certain groups and people because someone told us to. That's not our natural feelings. So we have to watch those too. So if you do feel biased or discriminatory toward something or someone, ask yourself why. It didn't just magically appear to you. You don't just magically feel that way. There is a reason why. And so we use the why meditation to figure that out. Where and what is the core reason that you feel a certain way about something or someone? So if you sit down and meditate, ask yourself why, and you come up with an answer, ask yourself again why. Because even that answer has a reason. And that second answer has a reason. And that third answer has a reason. You go down and down and down and down until you develop and find that core reason of why, whatever it is you feel or whatever, right? There's a core reason. Once you have that core reason, now you have something tangible. Now you have something that you can use to pluck out of your life. If it's a person, for instance, you'll know what you need to do, but you may have to distance yourself from them. You may have to unfriend them. You may have to change the type of relationship you have with them, whatever it may be, right? You'll know what you need to do. But now you have one less thing that's causing you suffering or discomfort in life out of your life. You may have 1,000 million other things, but you still have one less. So that's still a success. And if you continue doing that same routine for everything else, now you can pluck out a few dozen more, a few hundred more, a few thousand more, and eventually you have nothing to cause suffering. You're enlightened. And that's the goal. So pluck out those weeds of defilements in our mind, to purify our mind until we have that big aha moment. And truly we'll have a fireworks show in our mind that actually doesn't actually happen. That's the goal. Excellent. I'm going to write that question down in my book. Thanks. Yes.
Just I was thinking of something as you were talking about the root cause of the hospice. A couple of times I've done that, and it just never seems like I can get to any root cause. But one of the realizations I had was that you make you realize that nothing exists by itself.
Right.
That even though I could define
Because even if you don't find the core reason right away, right? And it could be in several sessions of meditation, right? It will almost never, depending on the severity of what you're thinking of, you may not ever find the conclusion in one sit, right? But if you go down and trickle down the line, you'll find other causes that are maybe causing suffering for other things in your life, right? And so if you pluck those out, then those other things fall away too. So you can kill 10 defilements with one stone. There's always a root to everything. There's a correct answer to this. There's a root to everything, but I don't want to give it away. I want to let you find it. Because you're on the right track. Your answer is, the conclusion it's right there. You're so close. But I don't want to give it away. I want to let you discover it. Yeah, I'm so tempted. I just want to cover my mouth. It's right there. I think you know what it is. I think a lot of you may know what it is. It's the I'll give you a hint at least. It is but probably one of the main one of the main topics of discovery in Buddhism. Let's just say that. Close. What does no self end up being? Think of prajna paramita. There we go. So even the core reason of whatever you're thinking of is essentially empty. But you need to know what that core reason is in order to say that it's empty. Okay, I have 4 minutes. I want to quickly describe emptiness in a very simplified version. Emptiness, shunyata in Buddhism, in Sanskrit, shunyata, is essentially, for the most part, our goal of discovery in Buddhism. Because according to Buddhism, everything in the world and in the universe is empty. But what does that mean? Empty here does not mean like zero, right? Or like empty and full. It doesn't mean nothingness. There we go. It means that in every phenomena in the world and in the universe is empty because things have causes and conditions, right? Nothing emerges in life on its own. You can't point to anything anywhere where you can say, this is born exactly like this. This is how it is all the time, right? If you look at flowers, for instance, they just didn't magically appear here. These are not real flowers. But if they were real flowers, they didn't just magically appear here, right? It required soil, it required water, it required the seeds, it required the sun, right? So it required other conditions, non-flower conditions, to make the flower. But even those non-flower conditions needed other conditions to make them, right? And the list goes on and on and on. So when we say something is empty, that means that it requires causes and conditions to be in existence. And because nothing exists without something else, so we say everything is empty. So and that's kind of how we want to approach, when we meditate on impermanence. Because nothing, again, is impermanent, or nothing is permanent. And because everything's impermanent, that should attempt to give us this realization that when something breaks in life, or someone dies or whatnot, that it's not, it's a tragic story, but it's not the end of the world, right? Because these are inevitable endings. Everything needs to break. Everything needs to disappear. Everyone needs to die. But we're so hurt when that happens because we have an attachment to those things and those people. But in reality, they too are empty. And so if we are able to meditate on impermanence and recognize that we will all age, we will all get sick, and we will all die. And this goes for everything else. Nothing in the world lasts forever. This building may last for hopefully hundreds of years, but eventually it'll still have to crumble. Your car may go on for hundreds of thousands of miles, but eventually it too will die, right? And so nothing is going to be permanent. And if the sooner we're able to recognize and acknowledge that, accept that, right? Because we know this on an intellectual level, that nothing is permanent in life. But we don't, at a fundamental level, we don't accept it. We know it's there. We're like, I don't want to deal with it. But with that kind of mindset, when someone does die, or when a breakup happens, or something disappears, or something breaks, we get so upset about it. Because we didn't want to accept it. We knew about it, but we didn't want to accept it. So if you accept death, when it happens, it won't be so tragic. You understand that this is just part of life. Because what can sometimes happen is when someone close to you dies, some people get so distraught, so overcome with sadness and depression that they don't have the capability to take care of the situation. Let's say your parent died, one of your parents died. And if you're the oldest or the more mature sibling, or if you're the only sibling, you're essentially in charge of their entire funeral service. You're in charge of their belongings. You're in charge of their estate and all this other stuff. If you're so depressed and distraught about the loss, you have no capacity to do those things. You're kind of wasting time, essentially, right? But if you accept that tragedy, if you accept the loss, then you have the mental capacity. You're in the correct mental state to take care of those things at a decent level without worrying about everything else. Okay, let's stop talking now. Any last minute questions before we sit for our session? Okay. So we'll go ahead and do our sitting. We'll have a full 30 minutes, 25. And then we'll do our walking meditation after that. So feel free to get up and stretch out if you need to, before our sit. Please rise for our walking meditation. Sorry, 2 points that emerged that I don't want to forget about. we'll come back. Oops. Wanted to add the signs for each of the factors. And so just to kind of reiterate, the subtle breathing comes when we're able to fully sustain our object meditation, right, the breath. And then once you feel the pleasant sensation in the body, and sometimes when we read about meditation, it references that we should put on a half smile while we meditate, right? So if you see statues of the Buddha and the Bodhisattvas, they have all of a half smile. It's not just for aesthetic reasons, right? So if you do a half smile, then that typically, for the most part, will become the pleasant sensation. So all you have to do is just shift a few centimeters down from the Anapanasati to the smile, right? And use the smile as your object of meditation for the pleasant sensation. If it feels pleasant. If not, then find something else that's pleasant. And then once that's strong enough and that peaks, right, then you start to maybe achieve the nimitta, right? And this is the shapes, colors, or lights that emerge. This may or may not happen. It's not always a thing, right? Sometimes just your mind's not creative enough to see any nimitta. So don't feel like this is 100% gonna happen, because it may or may not, right? But once you get to total concentration, where you're able to sustain the object of meditation or the pleasant sensation for the entire duration of your sit, then you can say this is access concentration. One way that I used to do back in the day, and sometimes even now when I'm doing longer sits, is putting on white noise in the background, or static, right? So if you put on white noise or static, it's not loud enough, but also not low enough, right? It's just background noise. If you use that, not paying attention to it, but just using that white noise, when you get to the final step of one pointness or total concentration, that white noise, the sound that you hear, will disappear. You're going to be so absorbed into your object of meditation that, again, when you're in access concentration, some of your senses disappear. Sense of touch, sense of smell, and the hearing. So if you put on white noise or static, something that doesn't have, like, don't use music, because music's not a good use. Because sometimes then you'll be singing along or paying attention to listening to the lyrics or the noises, whatever it may be. So don't worry about the music part. But use white noise. White noise is very effective. At least it is for me. So you can experiment with white noise or static. But if you do that, and when you do that, and you get to the point where the hearing of the white noise disappears, then you're fully concentrated. You're fully absorbed into object of meditation. So that's another effective sign as well. 2 points that I wanted to make that I forgot about. Any last minute questions, concerns? Yes, sir.
Even for something like noise, you have to be careful not to be attached to it.
Correct.
It's just a tool.
Correct.
Because if you get used to it, then it's like, oh, I can't meditate because I don't have white noise, right?
That's right. Yes, don't. That's right. White noise is also something we do not want to attach to, because it's a very effective tool, and because it's very effective, we may fall into the habit of always needing it to meditate. So one way to kind of get out of that is to skip sessions with and without using it. So you may start, for today you'll use it, tomorrow you don't, the next day you use it. That way you don't get too attached. I mean, it still may happen, but you're going to have to gauge how you feel about it. But it's very effective, at least in my experience. You can sit for hours and just be blissful. It's very nice. I was, because our retreat's coming up, right? And fortunately for you, unfortunately for me, the longest sit's only an hour. I say only an hour. It's not that long. But I was contemplating, I was wondering, I was like, maybe I should put white noise on to help get everyone in it. So we'll see about that. But the object of a retreat, at least the idea, is to achieve access concentration. Because all our sits, the shortest I believe is 30 minutes and the longest is an hour. We have about 4 or 5 sits a day, for the day. So we'll have plenty of time to put this into practice. And it's enough time, it's only half a day, it's 12 hours, but it should be enough time for you to see some results. And the results is all you need to get out of I already erased it, to get out of the hindrance of doubt, right? Doubt is a hindrance because we're not always, but we may end up starting to question ourselves, question if we're doing the meditation right, questioning if we are actually achieving anything, are we advancing, is something happening, is nothing happening, is what I'm doing right, is what I'm doing wrong, is this the right way, is this the wrong way? Once you get a result, right, whether it's something by what I taught you or something that you've achieved on your own, but once you achieve a result, once you have that aha moment, and it could be something very small and mundane, but once you have it, it's such a wonderful feeling to have, because you're like, I did something happened, right? And so it kind of gets, hopefully will get you out of any kind of funk or doubt that we may have. All right. Like everything else in the world. Correct. Correct. You're right. We don't want to, because when we sit for meditation, it's important to also have an intention of why we're sitting. Because Buddhist meditation is very different from like the meditation that you may get from a mindfulness center or there's a program, transcendental meditation. I don't know if anybody's heard it. But transcendental meditation is something they use in schools and prisons and workplaces, right? It's just something to help people de-stress and whatever. That's good for you, right? Do that, it's fine. But the results of that type of meditation is already happening here, right? The results of being stress-free, of being less anxious, and all these other things that people use meditation for, these are just natural side effects that happen during meditation regardless of the type, right? And so don't try to ease anxiety and depression and all that, because it'll happen regardless, right? But at the same time, we don't want to sit for those intentions, and we don't want to sit for these intentions, right? Don't sit to say, I want to achieve all 5 factors today, because it may or may not happen. If it doesn't happen, you're just going to disappoint yourself. And so, but sit with the intention that you want to develop concentration. Sit with the intention that you want to learn how to observe the mind. You want to sit with the intention of how to learn how your mind works, right? So again, the mind's the master of you. You're not the master of your mind. And the more you get to know how your mind works and how it reacts to situations in life, the easier and the more power you have to react correctly or according to the situation that's applicable. So sit with the intention of, I'm going to develop my concentration. If these happen, they happen. If they don't happen, they don't happen. Don't get hurt one way or the other. Just worry about developing the concentration. Okay. Anything else? Yes? No? Maybe so? Cool. All right. Well, I appreciate everyone for being here for our last class of the semester. I enjoyed everyone's company. If you have not been with us for previous classes, everything's on our YouTube, where I've gone through all the factors in detail, one at a time, to give you more of an idea of what each are and how they apply to your meditation practice. Otherwise, I hope to see everyone at our retreat on the 9th of December. Thank you. Yes, the next Sunday's teachers, our abbot's birthday celebration. It's moved from 12:30 to 9 a.m. That's next week. Tomorrow's still 12:30. Next week is the 9 o'clock, and the week after that is our retreat.